questions, I will put them into one question because they are both similar. You have mentioned in your book that the most crucial period of Kashmir history has been between the downfall of Hindu kings, and the rise of Shahmir. What were the causes of this downfall? This is question number one. And question number two, which is part of it, is that what were the causes that led to the downfall of Hindu kings of Kashmir, and particularly its transition to Islam, because that is a very, very important aspect of Kashmir's history, which is attracting a lot of attention in view of what all is happening there. And more importantly, what was the role of Sufis, particularly of Sayyid Hamdani and Bulbul Shah? Can you please elaborate on this?
Okay. A few things must be understood before we try to answer this question. It's a very important question. Number one, that Islam came to India, came to Kashmir, was brought to Kashmir not by warriors from Arabia, as they did in other parts of the world, like Mesopotamia, like Iran, like Central Asia. Islam did not come to Kashmir through the Arab warriors.
Arab warriors, right?
No, not through Arab warriors, but it came to Kashmir through Islamic missionaries. They came to Kashmir, they preached Islamic faith, they converted people, and they gave it the strength, the color, and the culture which you find today. But here, you have to divert your attention to two important points, very important points, which historians generally do not mention. Number one, the missionaries. The first important missionary is Amir Sayyid Ali Hamadani, whom Kashmiris call Shahi Hamadan. And second missionary is his son, Muhammad Hamadani. And then there are so many of them. And the last of them in 1574 is Shamsuddin Araki, again an Iranian. Now, you will have to understand two important things about these missionaries. These Muslim missionaries, whether they call themselves as Sayyids, meaning coming down from the dynasty of the Prophet, whether they really were or were not, that's not the point. The point is, number one, they were Iranians or Central Asians. They were not of Semitic origin. They were of Aryan descent. Number two, they were converted to Islam because prior to the advent of Islam in Iran, there was Zoroastrian faith. Iranians were Zoroastrians. And that in itself was a very strong faith in its heydays, and a well systematized structure, civil structure, social structure, fire worshippers and so on, so forth and so on. Now, these people, their ancestors had been converted from Zoroastrian faith to Islamic faith. That's very important. And second thing, they were of Aryan stock, not of Semitics. They were not Arabs. Shahi Hamadan was not an Arab. He was of an Aryan stock. So was his son. So were hundreds of others who came from Iran and Central Asia. It makes a difference. Why? You'll ask me what difference? The difference is that when a person gets converted from one original faith to another faith, a new faith, he becomes highly fanatical and rabid. It's a psychological phenomenon because he has to prove to those who converted him, he has to prove to them that he is more loyal than the king. He is more Islamic than what they are. Therefore, these missionaries were more fanatic than any Arab missionary going to Mesopotamia, going to southern France, going to Cordoba, going to Central Asia, Samarkand, and Bukhara. Things like that. This is one thing. The Hindu rule, Kalhan wrote Raj Tarangani in 1149. The Hindu rule persisted for about a century more, and the decline had already begun. The decline of Hindu rule is attributable to several factors. Number one is that the rise of Mongols in Central Asia, when Genghis Khan and his hordes rose, these hordes became a threat to the caravans that were carrying merchandise from China all along the Silk Route to Samarkand and Bukhara and other parts of Western Asia. Kashmir was linked to that route via two passes. One is Khardungla, that's what you call today Daulat Beg Oldi in Ladakh. And that other part was via Sawat Gir, that means Northwest Frontier Province. So these two routes connected Kashmir with Central Asian Silk Route. Because Silk Route came under threat of Mongol predators, hordes, they looted them. Therefore, this was a great loss to economic loss to Kashmir. I may remind you that King Harsha is reported to have fallen to bad days. He had economic crunch, and then he ordered that the gold and other copper metallic idols should be destroyed and melted away so that he is able to get the gold and run the economy of the country. So economic depression is one of the biggest causes of the downfall of Hindu rulers. They had not found the alternatives. The second was the incursions of Central Asian hordes, especially Zulchu. The Zulchu, the Baharistan writes that Zulchu attack was so fierce and devastating that even people could not find, he writes the word Dramun, Dal, Re, Mim, Vav, Nun. In Kashmir, he writes that even Dramun could not be found. Dramun means turf, grass. Even people could not get grass, turf to eat. That was the rapacity, that was the destruction brought by Zulchu. And the Kashmirian king had to run away. It was only his wife, Kotarani, who was able to give some semblance of order to the administration. That also in great difficulties. Kotarani had engaged Shahmir, Mir Shahmir. About Shahmir, Historians say that he was a descendant from the royal family of Pandavas in Savadgir. This is not true. I have not accepted that theory. I have proved through Sanskrit sources, Junraja and Srivara others, that he hailed from Panchgavara. Panchgavara is the area which lies between present-day Rajouri and Buddal, right up to Shopian. Now, this was the area called Panchgavara. He had come from this area. He was thrown out by his rivals from his place. Of course, he was a nominated person, but he was thrown out and he had settled down somewhere near Uri and with his clan. But later on, because he was a warrior, no doubt, he had a fighting qualities. And later on, when Queen Kotarani was in a great trouble owing to the Zulchu's rapacity, and when Zulchu had gone, local Damras, local warlords had risen, everybody was rising, asking for power. There was total disorder in the country. Then Kotarani offered him the post of a general, a commander, and he fought. Of course, he fought against these local commanders, local predators, and he was able to, along with the stepbrother of Kotarani, his name was Bhikshana Bhatta. He lived in Pulwama. He was a commander, and then another commander was Shamir. They worked together and they threw back these predators and then restored order. But later on, what happened, that Shahmir became ambitious to overthrow Kotarani. He got Bhikshana Bhatta murdered, overthrew Kotarani at Andarkot, which is Abhiyantara Kota in Sumbal, near Sumbal, where is the confluence of two rivers. And there he captured the court, he captured power, and then his reign, which started in 1300, around about 1342, the Islamic, this was the beginning of the Islamic regime in Kashmir. So this is a checkered period from the downfall, from the advent of the Zulchu up to the rise of Shahmir. This falls about 100 more years. The history of this period is not known to us. And much of the true history of Kotarani and her courtiers and her struggle to maintain the Hindu Raj is not available to us. It's a surmise and nothing. For example, in regard to Kotarani herself, there are varying opinions. Some say she did not marry at all because Shahmir told him to marry him. She was the queen and marry him. She refused, but he forced her. And on the wedding night, she entered her room. She had a dagger. She put her dagger into her belly. His intestines came out and said, "Here is my acceptance." And she died. This is one version. Other version is that she married for 2 or 3 days and then she left. Things like that, so many stories are being written, are being said, but some of these stories have not been clearly told by Baharistan-i-Shahi. But you see, one thing I must tell you, that I have written exhaustive footnotes to Baharistan-i-Shahi, exhaustive footnotes. That's why I worked for about 5 to 6 years to collect the footnotes, and I have put them in the notes. So I could not change. I did not change a single word of the original text, but wherever I had to add notes or explanations, I have put it in the footnote. So that is the story of the decline of Hindu regime, Hindu government, and the rise of Islamic government.
Thank you,
At the
thank you, Dr.
time,
Saab. Thank you, Dr. Saab. I think we have to rush through a few more questions, and you have covered this aspect in a most elaborate manner. Of course, when you said that there are too many footnotes to your book, and yeah, that's a fact, because I had to literally struggle. Almost every page had so many footnotes that it was perhaps, if you take it out and check the content, it will become two more books of the same size. So it is a fact that there are too many footnotes, and that makes it an extremely exhaustive and very well explained story that you have tried to translate while putting a Persian manuscript into English. Now, my next question to you is that we see in all this that Zainul Abidin happened to be a tolerant king. At least that is what most of the historians are saying. Before him and after him, we saw enormous brutality and oppression and ruthless conversion of Hindus into Muslim faith. How do you ascribe? What do you ascribe Zainul Abidin's tolerant attitude in an ocean of intolerance? He appeared to be one tolerant person.
yes, intolerance started with Sikandar Butshikan. And my thinking is that Sikandar himself was not that fanatic as we look at him. I also believe that his minister, Suhbat, was not also that fanatic as is being portrayed. Sikandar Butshikan had two wives, both of them were Hindus. He had two daughters, both of them were married to Hindus. And Sahabat was also a Hindu. He had great connections with Hindu families. He was a prominent man. I am of the opinion, I have made enough research on that the evil force behind Sikandar was Muhammad Hamadani, the son of Amir Sayyid Ali Hamadani. He was the evil force behind him. This is precisely what Junaraja says, and what Shukka also says, that he was the evil force. It was he who instigated the Sultan, Sikandar, to destroy temples and convert the Hindus forcibly, which the details of this have been given in Baharistan-i-Shahi. As regards Sultan Zainul Abidin Badshah, we are told that in early life, he was also a fanatic. He was not a very, a liberal type of man, no. But then it so happened that he caught a very dangerous disease, some disease which could not be treated by the Hakims of his court. And somebody brought the news to him, to the court, that there is a Pandit, physician, well known among the Kashmiri Pandits. If he could be consulted, he should be able to give us a good suggestion. He was Shri Bhatt. Shri Bhatt was brought to the court, and then he treated the king. And I think he had some dangerous carbuncle on his chest or on the neck or somewhere, which was not getting right. He treated him for a long time and finally restored him to health. And then Rabadin asked him what remuneration, honorarium would he expect from him for treating him. He said, Your Majesty, I don't want anything for myself, but my exiled committee should be brought back and resettled in Kashmir in their place homes. This had a great impact on the mind of Sultan Zainul Abidin, and it turned his whole heart. He said, it's a crime to have exiled people of this community who are knowledgeable or well-versed in sciences and arts, and we become poorer by sending them away from our country. Therefore, he changed his mind. He reversed the policy of his predecessors. He brought the Hindus back. Their books were brought back. They were rehabilitated. Temples were rebuilt. Life was restored. And the customs of the Hindus were reintroduced, and life was returned to as it was in previous days. In Hindu time, he himself would attend their functions and their religious rites, and had musicians, liberal. The court became liberal, and he was a true king, far bigger than his size. That's why the Pandits called him Badshah, or big king.
Thank you, Dr. Saab. I guess a related question I wanted to tell you, except for Badshah, which I which I asked you in my question, that he was tolerant and he brought the back, but immediately after that, the operation started once again. Now, what I wanted to ask you, despite all this ruthless brutality, right from the time Zulchu came and then was followed by Rinchen and Sikandar Butchakin and Araki and various other people. Now, what I wanted to ask you was, how did Hindus manage to retain their faith despite facing such brutal oppression and I would say brutal proselytizing? How did they manage to retain their faith right till the time the Sikhs started ruling Kashmir? And then came the Dogras, which from religious point of view, they got some respite. How did Hindus manage to retain that faith? What were the strong points?
After Sultan Zainul Abidin, during his time, the Hindus had come back. They had resettled and taken to normal life, and they lived somewhat peaceful life. But later on, a few things happened. The advent of Baihaqi Sayyids. Baihaq is the name of a town in Iran, in Khorasan. They originated from that place. They came because they were the Sunnis, not Shia, Sunnis. And they aspired power in Kashmir. They were supported by the Tughlaq kings, Muhammad Tughlaq and Firuz Shah Tughlaq in Delhi. So they came to Kashmir and they assumed power. And one of them even became the king also. They were great warriors, and they showed their mettle in fighting, in supporting the king or in opposing the king. They always participated in fightings, helping one king to gain power or defeating another king to lose the crown. Things like that went on. But these Sayyids did not treat Hindus well. they considered them as their enemies because the Hindus at that time fraternized with local Sunnis and Muslims. And they together, I mean the local converted Hindus who had become Sunnis now, they joined hands with the Hindus and they opposed Bahikis because they were the outsiders. They were not Kashmiris. So this was a tussle between insiders and outsiders. That was one thing. Second, then two people who were in power. One is Musa Rana, a recently converted to Noor Bakhshia order, and Kaji Chek, who was also converted to Noor Bakhshia order by Shamsuddin Araki. The greatest havoc which has been created, the greatest damage and destruction which has been done to Kashmiri Hindus, their culture, their religion, their temple, their shrines, was by Shamsuddin Araki. Baharistan-i-Shahi has given us a number of hints of atrocities perpetrated by Araki, but he has given a very interesting hint that the biography of Shamsuddin Araki, which is titled Tuhfatul Ahbab, gives the details of the destruction of Hindus. So after completing the translation of Baharistan-i-Shahi, I went in search of Tuhfatul Ahbab because that gave the details. That's a different story. We'll do it some next time because we didn't have the time at this time. Now these two persons, Kaji Chak and Musa Rana, they did the greatest damage, this total destruction of Kashmiri Hindus and temples. They, in Tuhfatul Ahbab, we are told that on the orders of Shamsuddin Araki, 53 important temples of whose names have been given in Tuhfat, they were destroyed. The way they were destroyed and the conversion process, and then through the Sufis. You asked me a question about Sufis. Now I come to that question. The Sufis, according to Shamsuddin Araki, are those converted to Noor Bakhshia order who use muscle power in forcibly destroying temples and converting Hindus into Islamic faith. They were given the name of Sufis. That is a sophisticated word that has been used, but in practice, they were the present-day terrorists. They let loose terror. If you read Tuhfatul Ahbab, you will find precisely the same methodology adopted by these Sufis, which the terrorists have adopted in contemporary times, whether in India or elsewhere. You see, the Sufis are originated in Saudi Arabia, in Arabia, and then in Iran. The original Sufis were pious men, God-fearing men, and they did not think that there was any need of an intermediary between man and God. They believed in the omnipotence and omnipresence of God, Wahdullah Sharuf. That means he is the one, God is one. Now, this was the earliest concept of Sufism. But later on, when, in the course of time, when Sufism was politicized, because the local satraps in Iran and Central Asia, they tried to woo the warlords and the warlords, to gain popularity, began to politicize the Khanqah, that is the worshipping place, prayer place, and the Sufis. The Sufis became corrupted, and the time came. It's around the days of Timur Lame, that he became a deadly enemy of the Sufis, because the Sufis had been corrupted and they were conspiring against him, against his rule. That's why he marched against them, and he wanted to chastise even Amir Sayyid Ali Hamadani, who was also calling himself a Sufi, but Timur wanted to punish him. He managed to run away and came to Kashmir, and then followed the other Sufi.
Dr. Shab, can you briefly throw some light? What I have seen from your book is that the Chak rule was, in fact, in all the history of Kashmir after Islam came there in about middle of early 14th century, the Chak rule is marked by enormous internecine warfare, fratricidal killing, and always someone from the Chak family is killing somebody else from the same family or a larger extended Chak family. Now, I want you to tell us briefly, why was this happening, and did this finally laid bare Kashmir's territory to the Mughals, who finally captured it from them? This will be my last question. Kindly elaborate on it.
The Chaks were originally Hindus from Drao, from Kiran and Gilgit region. The Chak is a short of chakra, and Kaji Chak is actually Kanchan Chakra. That is its original name. They were converted. Most of them were converted to Shia faith. They were fighters, very fair fighters. Physically, they were very strong. And in their faith, they were very fanatical. The Chaks have always been in confrontation with the Sunnis, with the Sunni rulers, Sunni commanders, and Sunni prominent men. That's why you find in Baharistan, the Chaks always fighting, either with a king or against a king. And the element of Sunni Shia faith was very much there till the last minute. And the entire history of medieval Kashmir, that is 480 years, is only, I will sum up in two aspects. Number one, either it's an internecine war, fighting between themselves, internal dissensions, either one ruler or the other ruler. Whosoever is defeated, he runs away, crosses the Pir Panchal and goes to Punch and Rajouri, prepares there for another year, another retreat, and comes back and fights and gains the crown. That's one. The second aspect is that of destruction. The entire period of 481 years is a period in which the only outstanding work which these people used to do was to destroy Hindus, destroy their temples, and destroy their shrines and convert them. And then after conversion, no development whatsoever. So the Chak period, especially the last period of Chak, because Yusuf Shah was a happy-go-lucky man, he was not paying much attention to the military aspect, the defense of the country. And then the Sunnis were sending delegations to Akbar. One delegation was led by Sarfi to the court of Akbar, that there is a Shia rule in Kashmir and Shias are destroying us. Please come help, take over Kashmir. They invited Kashmir. They invited Akbar. And some of the Kashmir commanders went to Sher Shah Suri in Patna, invited him to come and attack Kashmir. But anyway, so the Czechs were did not take care of the defense of the country, and then Mughals sent their troops. They fought. Yusuf Shah Chak fought, but he could not win. He was taken a prisoner and sent to Patna, and the Chak dynasty came to an end. After that, in 1586, the Mughals captured Kashmir, and it became a province of Mughal Empire. That was the end of Chak dynasty.
Thank you, Dr. Saab. I mean, obviously, a book of this magnitude, of its importance, and of the, its significance, I would say, significance to Kashmir's history, obviously cannot be paraphrased in just 1 hour or a little more than an hour. But I think as a start, as an introduction to this very, very significant book, which every Indian must read, particularly those who are interested in Kashmir history. It's what happened after the downfall of Hindus until the time Kashmir became nearly 100% Islamic. I think this is an inescapable document, and very, very significant. And you have done a tremendous work by firstly getting hold of the manuscript, then taking so much of trouble to translate it into English and making it available to the general public. We would like to thank Sampark Bharti for having given us this platform to speak to you, Dr. Saab. I'm sure we will speak about your other book, which is also as important, about which you spoke a little while ago, Thawfat al-Ahbab. And we will continue to interact with you and get to share your wisdom and your experience of having translated both the manuscripts. Thank you very much, and we hope that we continue this interaction in future also. Thank you. Namaskar.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Namaskar.